So I want to thank everybody for coming today to our SALT Talks, our Lunch and Learn. This whole month and into January, we're going to be looking at independent living. You know, everything that's going on with independent living, just different aspects. So last Tuesday night, we had Allison Boot speak. She lives independently. She was a graduate of Wright State, and she spoke about her experience, her own personal experience with living independently. So today I wanted to touch on, we titled it Home Sweet Home. We wanted to touch on independent living in the sense of housing. Now, we know that several of you are from different counties, and our presenter tonight is from Butler County, but we have it in a sense like whatever you learn today, you can take it back to your SSA or your county. And if you're not with a county board of developmental disabilities, and you want to check it out, let me know, and I'll get you the link or someone to reach out to at your county board for eligibility. But we are looking at housing, and now housing is different in every county. So we want to make sure you get the baseline, something to start with and some information. So for those who don't know who I am, I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry, but my name's Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Trainer Coordinator for the SALT series. And today I have Christy Ross. She's with Butler County, and I'm going to let her introduce a little bit more about herself before she presents, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Christy.
Sure. My name's Christy Ross. So my technical title is the Residential Options Coordinator here in Butler County. Very fancy title. I've been with the board for 15 years. I've been an SSA. This is new to me though, because I always worked with adults. So after everybody's transitioned from school and they're kind of settled. So this is new ground for me on this age group. So I'm learning a lot in this new role as well. So that is a little bit about myself. All right. Well, we will just kind of get started with our presentation. And like Patty said, if you have questions, I'm more than comfortable to say, hey, hold up, I have a question. And that is fine by me. Okay, so we're just going to start at the very beginning. What are the first steps? I think the biggest question that I have when someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm interested in my son and or daughter to move out is budget. Money is a huge talking topic. So what we look at is how much income do I have a month? Does your person have Social Security? Does your person work? What does that look like? Have you applied for Social Security? All those steps. So for me, that's the very first most important thing is what's your budget? What can we look at? Because we all know that the housing market right now is it's outrageous, needless to say. So from there, how do we find housing? In Butler County, we come at it from different angles. You can find it on your own. You can look for rentals on your own. Driving down the road, do you see something when you're on the internet, Facebook, all those kinds of things? Do you know someone? Do you have a family or friend that already is out living in an apartment on their own and they're looking for a roommate? Or you know someone else that you're friends with and the two of you want to move out and find a place together. In Butler County, we have a referral process where we work with an agency where we ask kind of those basic questions of what's your income, what are you looking for, what do you need, and then that agency helps us help you find somewhere to live within your budget. And then of course, is someone moving out for the first time, we kind of go through those processes as well of, do you want a roommate? Do you not want a roommate? And then we go into where can I live? And it's just like anybody else. All the options are available. We can look at apartments. We can look at condos. We can look at houses. You can look at renting a home. And I know that we've had conversations with parents in the past of, well, what if we purchase a home for our son and or daughter? So things to think about if that's the option that you're thinking about purchasing a home for someone. A lot of times the son or daughter has Medicaid, and we all have to stay under those Medicaid budget limits as resources, that is. So your savings account, your cars, your homes. From what I have been told and what we have seen, if your individual has Medicaid, as long as the person lives in the home, it is not seen as a resource, so it will not count against them. So say the house is actually in the person's name, your son and or daughter's name. As long as they live in the home, it will not affect their Medicaid. However, say you purchased a home for them, but it didn't work out, and now you rent it out and they live somewhere else. That will count as a resource against them because they can sell the home and then earn funds from it. So as long as they live in that home, it will not be an issue. The next thing that we talk about with owning a home is think about even renting homes, I should say, is maintenance. Who's going to take care of that? Who's going to cut your grass? Who's going to shovel the snow? Those are all things to think about with renting and or owning your home. Another question I bring up when I'm talking to families, if the person is going to own their home, that's great that you're here now and can help out, but what happens sadly when you're not here? So can your son and or daughter afford to continue, for replace the roof or replace a hot water heater or just those maintenance that comes with owning a home? Because unfortunately, when you're no longer here, all that responsibility falls on to your son and or daughter.
Christy, we do have a question out there. They ask, can the home be in the parent's name and they just rent it?
Yes, it can. And we have seen situations where the parent owns the home and just their son and or daughter lives in the home only. Or we've seen situations where their son and or daughter, and then they bring in roommates. So then at that point, you need to have the mind frame too of you're acting like a landlord at that point because you have other people besides your loved one living there. So, there needs to be that lease and responsibilities of a landlord. So that sometimes is a little bit more responsibility than what parents want to get involved in sometimes. Okay. One of the questions was life skills to work on. I think when you're looking at situations, especially when you're moving out of the family home for the very first time, they're used to mom and dad doing a lot of things for them. So I'm not saying a lot of these things that we're going to talk about, the person should be able to do, fully independently on their own. But, can we work on those skills to where maybe they just need some verbal prompts or some coaching or a little hands-on? And if that's not possible, that's okay. But these are just kind of things because we want the person to be as independent as they can be. So when we're looking at, moving out or being out on your own or with a roommate, we're looking at, can you do your own laundry? Can you clean your house? Now, maybe that doesn't mean, on the floor, hands and knees, washing the baseboards, but can you run a sweeper? Can you dust? Can you clean the windows? Those types of things. Cooking, and again, not on a stove or an oven, but can you use the microwave? How much help and how much can you do on your own is what we're looking at. Bathing or taking a shower, can you do all that on your own? Can you do the water temperature? Can you wash your hair and rinse your hair? All those types of things is what we're looking at. And again, any amount of assistance that they can do is fantastic. Again, we want them to be as independent as they possibly can. Another set of skills is managing your money. Can they hold money? If we go to the grocery store, or even a small shopping trip to get bread and milk? Can they do that transaction on their own? Or do they need someone to help them with that to be sure they're giving the right amount and be sure they're getting the right amount back? Do they even know if they have a checking account and how that works? Making a grocery list. Can they sit down and write down, what do I need to get me through the week? These are the meals I want to make. So these are the items I need to get from the grocery store. And then at the grocery store, can they find all those items on their own? And again, it sounds like a lot, but any little piece that they can do is fantastic. And if they can't do any of it, then we're going to figure out how to get them some help to help them through that situation. Safety skills is another big one. Can they call 911 if something should happen? Do they know what to do in case of weather emergencies, fire, tornado, thunderstorms, all those things? Can they answer the door safely? You know, a lot of people, there's concerns of they'll just let anybody into the home. And again, with phone safety, there's a lot of scammers out there, unfortunately. So when they answer their phone, can they tell the difference between, you know, someone trying to take advantage of them or a friend calling? Another big topic is self-medicate. Can they take their medicines on their own? And there is an assessment that we use to help determine that. It's called the self-medication assessment. And I believe it's 9 or 10 questions. And it goes over, you know, do you know the name of your medicine? Do you know what your medicine looks like? Do you know why you take this medicine? And depending on how you answer those questions, lets us know that you can take your medicine all on your own. You can take it, but you need a little bit of assistance, meaning we need to set the medicine up for you. Maybe do like a pill minder, things like that. Or maybe just open the bottle for you and then you're good to go the rest of the way. Then to the third option where you can't do any steps on your own and you need someone there to help do that. So then if, say it's someone who needs to have someone give them their medicine, then we look at, okay, you're not living with family anymore, so who can come help you? Can mom and dad come over and do that? If not, you know, what can we do? What options are out there to help that? And those will all be discussions that you would talk to with your SSA about how we could fit that need. Right now, a big question is people want to live on their own. And like I had just said previously, the biggest issue we have right now is, can you afford to live on your own? From what I am seeing on my end, when I'm looking for apartments or houses for someone, the current rent for a 1-bedroom home is starting at $700 a month. And it can go as high as $1,100. And let's just be honest, a $700 a month bedroom or apartment or house may not be in the nicest of areas, or it just may not be aesthetically the nicest that you're looking at. So from what I'm seeing, the rent prices are going off of where the location is and how high in demand it is. So what we're looking at when we're having these discussions is a lot of the people that we work with, if they have any income, is Social Security. And that's the minimum $900 a month, roughly. So when you're looking at rent being $700 a month, that only leaves $200 to live off of. And then you still have your utility bills, you still have food, and all those other things that come with it. So then if rent's even higher than that, you know, of course, you don't even have the funds to get there. So unfortunately, what we're seeing right now is a lot of people, they may want to live on their own, but financially, we can't make that happen. Because even if another hurdle that we're seeing right now as well is say the person does have a little bit of a higher income, and we find a place that they like and can fit into their price range. The requirements to get there are out of touch. So meaning like an apartment complex used to just be your $25 application fee. Well, now we're seeing a $50 application fee. We're seeing anywhere from $100 to $300 administrative fee. I don't even know what that is, but we're seeing it on top of all these other fees to make it just, it's really hard. It's just really, really hard right now for housing, trying to find it for folks. So that's the biggest thing when we look at, can I live on my own? Unfortunately, right now, that most people's income and the rent prices the way they are right now, sadly, they just don't match. They're just not making it possible. So who pays for my housing? The person has to pay for all aspects of the housing. So they have to pay rent, deposits, utilities, food, if there's maintenance, like the mowing of grass, the snow removal, anything like that, that's going to fall on the person. There's no funding that pays for rent and utilities or food assistance. Some individuals may have a waiver. Don't know if everybody's familiar with that term or not, but even if your son and or daughter would have a waiver, the waiver again does not pay anything towards rent and or utilities. So if the individual cannot afford to live somewhere, sadly, they're either going to get evicted or we're going to come to the family to say, are you willing to help supplement or to meet this need? What if I need financial assistance? There are programs out there for food assistance. There, of course, is SNAP, which is through Butler County Job and Family Services. That's who the Medicaid comes from as well. So SNAP is a separate application that you can find on their website. You can apply online and it will ask for income and things like that. And depending on those requirements, they can get anywhere from, I've seen as minimum as $20 a month to I've seen as high as $150 a month. But again, all of that is based off of the person's income and living situation. There are some community programs that assist with utilities, and each one of those programs has their own requirements and application processes. There's an agency in Hamilton called Self, and they have a variety of programs. Through COVID, they had a lot of rental assistance programs available. Sadly, most of that funding is being cut. Those funds are now gone, but they still have some programs to help with that. If you own your home and you need some type of ramp or some other type of repair done, they have a program that sometimes helps with that, depending on the need and again, your income. Duke, if Duke is your utility, they have the PIP program where essentially what it is you pay a certain amount every month. So say your bill is $300. You're only responsible for $100 of it. However, that $200 stays on your bill. So it's not like that $200 goes away. It's still responsible. So think of it kind of as a credit card. That amount's just going to keep growing and growing and growing until you can pay the bill off. And with that PIP program, it's good to know that if you miss one payment, you then are kicked out of that program and then responsible for that full amount. So if your bill's over $1,000, they're going to want you to pay that $1,000 to keep the utilities on. Sometimes churches will help, not as much with a full bill, but maybe like $50 here to kind of help keep something on. And that's just calling the churches out there. So there are some programs out there, but not a whole lot. There are also programs out there it's not on this slide, but say that you're somewhere and you feel like the landlord is not taking care of the building or not addressing the needs the way that they should or as fast as what they should. There are agencies in the county, one's called Home, where we can contact them or link you up with them, and you let them know the situation and they will come out and advocate for you on your behalf. So there are also programs out there like that. So first time moving out and you're overwhelmed with everything else, and we're looking at your income, and I really, we know that the person can't handle those funds themselves, but also mom and dad don't want to continue to be that responsible for that, either paying the rent, things like that. There's a service called a payee service. So a payee is a person or agency who assists with managing your benefits. And this is Social Security. So if the person receives Social Security benefits, they would be your payee through Social Security. And that is an application that they have to complete through Social Security to apply to be your payee. And if there's a payee, because some people, they have Social Security, but they also work part-time. You can also turn over those wages to your payee and they'll manage all your funds that way. And they actually prefer it because they're responsible for keeping track of if you're over under resources for your job and family services redebt, which is your Medicaid and or food stamps. The payee can be a family member or friend. It doesn't have to be an agency. Again, that's just up to the individual who they want, as well as how much the family is willing to be involved. Most agencies do charge a fee. The last time I heard it's around $50. It could be a little under, but it's roughly $50, and that's every month. So that's something else to think about when we're looking at budget is, so say they only have Social Security, $900 a month, $50 is going to come off the bat. So now you're down to $850 because we're paying that payee service. That's that slide there, where they charge the monthly fee, and then a payee is responsible for paying all of your bills. So they will set a budget, they'll take your income and they'll look at all your bills, and they will automatically pay your rent, your utilities, all that every month. And then say that there is a little bit extra at the end of the month, they can send you, say, $25 weekly for, fun money to go out to eat or to go to the store or just this and that. And if you don't want any of those funds, then they will continue to, quote unquote, save your money. That money won't go anywhere. It will sit in that account. And then again, they will look at and keep track of, are you over that resource for job and family services? And if you are, they'll notify you and say, hey, is there anything that you need? Do you need new bedroom furniture, or do you need some new clothes? Do you need a new pair of shoes? And if you do, well, here's $100 to kind of help pay that, and we'll keep you under that resource amount. And of course, we don't want to spend money just to spend money. And that this is a whole other topic of conversation, but you could look at stable accounts and things like that to transfer the overage into, so that way you wouldn't have to look at other things like that.
I have another question here, Christy. It says, if it is a family member, do they have to apply to be a payee?
So most family members, I believe, just kind of work under the impression that they're the payee, because most of what I've seen is the checks are just going into that joint checking account. So essentially you think you are the payee. So I've seen it both ways. I would say technically you're supposed to, but I think most of the time, from what I've seen, most parents just kind of keep those funds when the person lives at home with them. Now, when they move out, they should apply to be the payee, if that makes sense.
And then a question I had was, you had mentioned the SNAP program and mentioned JFS. It's a SNAP program. Are we reaching out to Medicaid or to the JFS of each county?
It's the JFS of every county.
Okay.
Yep. So if you're in Butler County, you would reach out to Butler County Job and Family Services, and the same thing for Warren County, whichever county.
Okay. Thank you.
Huh? Will I have help? And those are discussions that we have, or that you'll have with your SSA when we're going through this process. We'll look at, what do you need help with? And again, that kind of goes back to those, what we call ADLs, cooking, cleaning, showering, those types of things. What do you need help with? How much help do you need? What can you do on your own? And then we're going to look at, can family members help? Yes, you're out on your own, but is mom and dad or brother, sister, someone, friend, willing to come over maybe an hour a week or a couple hours a week and help you out with those things? Then we look at technology. Technology has been fantastic the past couple years, and the things that we've seen, the Alexa device to set up reminders. I have a timer for the ovens on, a reminder for when I take my medicine, just all kinds of things. Automatic medication dispensers where the medication's set up and then you set in the time and it automatically spits out. So you don't have to worry about opening those bottles and things like that. We've even gone on to see, people have bed shakers and, special lights, and this just technology has really grown and there's a lot out there. So I would encourage you to talk to your SSAs through this process as well, at, when we're looking at, what do you need help with and how much help, how much technology is out there that could actually help out. I know social inclusion was a topic as well. And again, every county kind of has different opportunities. But here in Butler County, there are all kinds of sports. There's Special Olympics and all, you name it, Special Olympics probably has it. Swimming, basketball, golf, bocce, it's all out there. We also have the Joe Nuxall Softball League every summer. In Butler County, we have a program called Speak Up. It's an advocacy group. They meet every month in the evening at our office at Janet Clemens Centers on Fair Avenue. And it's a group of individuals that come together and just talk about issues and how they can put awareness out there and work on their needs and discuss what they want out of life, because we want everybody's voice to be heard. Butler County also has a community connections newsletter that goes out. So it's an email that's sent out by us, and it lists both in-person and virtual activities that are going on in the county. And it can be things like a fishing derby, or some of those Special Olympic signups, to dances, to maybe a group getting together on the internet to talk about autism or to talk about games. And if you're not getting that newsletter, if you want to get a copy of it or get on that email list, just email your SSA, or you can let me know and I can add you to the list. So that gets sent out, I believe, every quarter. I think, and when we're looking at things too, when we're going through this process, talking to your SSAs, we have to remember services are individualized. So services are developed for each person based on their need and their current situation. So, everybody has friends and everybody has connections. And a lot of times SSAs will get phone calls. Well, so-and-so has this, I want that too. And that's where we have to have those conversations of, services are individualized. We have to look at the person, their current situation, and their current need. And if we can access what this other person has, fantastic. Or maybe we can't access it now, maybe we have to wait. because their situation is different than the one that you're currently in. Another thing to remember is each county board has their own processes to services. So even though we all provide DD services, each county board operates differently. So say that you currently live in Warren County, but you move to Butler County. You'll go through our eligibility process. And once we, get you all set up, get documents from the county you're coming from, we open you here. Then we talk about how services we have here and how to access those. Well, I did this in Warren County. Well, unfortunately, that's not how we work here in Butler County. I know that can be a little confusing sometimes because you think, well, it's DD services, it should all be the same, but each county works differently. And then the last thing to remember is when we're looking at housing, ideally, the process should take time. We want to find the appropriate place for your son and or daughter. And that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And again, that goes back to what situation you're in. Because say it's a situation where someone is already living in the community and they need a roommate. They can't afford to live on their own. And so you call me and say, hey, my daughter, is looking for something. And I'm like, well, hey, this person might be a good match. Think of it as dating. I'm going to link the two of you up and you're going to meet up for a dinner or for a coffee. And you're going to have that small talk and kind of see, do you have things in common? And if that goes well, then we're going to schedule another one. And you're going to go to maybe a movie or maybe to dinner. And then that's going to build into spending the day together, or maybe spending the weekend together, to then maybe spending the night. And all that takes time because what we want everyone to be successful. We don't want to set anyone up for failure. So say we try to find, oh, well, so-and-so has an opening across the street. We like that neighborhood. We like that apartment. We're just going to move Sarah in there. Well, say a month down the road, Sarah and the roommate, they're fighting back and forth and they're just not getting along and just nitpickiness. Well, guess what? We don't have anywhere then to move Sarah to just because she's not getting along with her roommate. We're going to sit down and be like, what are the issues? What can we resolve? What can we help you guys out with? Because if she wants to move, now you're locked into a lease. And what is the responsibility and or consequence for breaking that lease? Is there a fee? Things like that. What if mom and dad say you can't come back here? And this is a hard topic to have, but we do have people go to homeless shelters, and that's something that people don't want to hear. But I think that's a big piece to remember, is that we just don't have housing out there to move people left and right. So when you do move out, or when you are in that apartment or home, we want it to be somewhere where you're happy, everybody's happy, and everybody's getting their needs met, because we just don't have somewhere to move you along. So it may seem like a long time, 3 to 6 months, or maybe even longer, but really we're hoping big picture wise that it helps us in the end. Also, when we're talking to SSAs and going through this process, of course, we're talking to your son and or daughter, things that you want, things that you like, things that you don't like, what works, what doesn't work. Just coming from an SSA, some of the things that we're looking at is wants versus needs. So the person wants to have their own bathroom. That's great. When we're looking at places is, do you need an accessible bathroom? And if you do, what do we need to put in there? And if you're renting a home or renting an apartment, most of the times we can't make those bathrooms accessible. So we have to find one that is accessible. I want pizza every Friday. Well, that's great. As an SSA, I need to know, can you eat the whole piece of pizza? Does your food need to be cut into small bites? Is there a choking risk? all those kinds of things. You want to go to the movies every Saturday. As an SSA, we're looking at, do you need someone to purchase that ticket for you? Can you hold your money? Again, can you get snacks? Those kinds of things. So we want, obviously, person-centered, what the individual wants and needs or wants, and then SSAs are looking at that, but then also, okay, then what do you need to support that? And sometimes they don't always see eye to eye, or, this is what I really want. Well, this is what we need to address. So, but that is the theory behind that, wants versus needs. And I flew through that really, really fast. I apologize. I'm a fast talker.
Does anybody have any questions? I mean, you can type them in the chat box and I'll read them. One of the things that I know you're with Butler County, and I know there's some other counties on here, but in general, what do you think is the most common housing that people tend to lean towards when they're looking? And where does the end result usually end up?
Most of the time, they're homes in the community, like renting a home. That's mainly what we see. I think especially now with there are folks with apartments out there, but most of the times it's homes with roommates. That's the typical housing situation that we see, especially in today's rental crisis.
And then the homes with roommates, are these homes that have like with the maintenance and stuff, are they and their roommates responsible then for when they're renting a house then for the maintenance, or is this something else steps in?
There are both situations. There are houses out there where it's a landlord that is responsible for everything. They'll come in, you call them, and they'll take care of everything. And then there's other, places where the landlord will say, well, this is only what I'm going to fix. So say the dishwasher goes out, I'm not going to replace that. So we see both.
Over the years, I've heard different parents that have had like creative options, like, some have made their basements like into an apartment or something. Have you heard of different options that parents have used that has been very effective and helpful?
I have heard about them. I don't know how effective. I don't get that follow through. But yes, I know that some parents have converted the basement into like their own private apartment, and they'll charge rent, which is totally fine. I think that falls back onto the parent. How involved do they want to be? That financial responsibility. And again, the question I would pose is, so then unfortunately, when something needs to happens to that parent, then where are we going to move the person? Can they afford to stay in the house in the basement, or do we need to look for other housing? To me, as much plan prep, not that it all needs to be laid out, but if we can document somewhere what we think the plan's going to be in the future, the better off that we are. That way we're not grasping for straws or in an emergency situation like, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do?
There's a question out there. Are there community housing options for special needs? Can you give some examples and places where they can live, but there are aides to check in on residents?
So there are places called intermittent care facilities, what we call ICFs. It is a terrible comparison, but just for a visual, just think of like a nursing home type setting for people with disabilities. So those types of facilities typically are for the more medically involved, severe, profound intellectual disability individuals. So there are those types of settings out there. Most of the homes that are out there, some people do have staff that are paid for through their waiver. So the individual, and that can range anywhere depending from drop-in services, a couple hours a week, to maybe the person needs 24/7 care. And that goes back to working with your SSA about what's the current need, how much help does your individual need, and working through that process to determine all of that. So say you and I, live in an apartment on our own. But I have staff that come check on me 15 hours a week, but you have someone that comes and helps you specifically, maybe 20, but they take both of us out together to go to the grocery store or take us out to go to the movies or whatever. And all of that would be discussed what that person would help out with through that planning process with your SSA.
So if they're a higher functioning individual, bringing in someone to aid in just if they were renting at home or if they were like higher functioning, whether it be a single or a group or, a couple together. That would they have like a provider coming in, or what are the options for higher functioning then?
I think again, that would be a conversation with your SSA because not everybody has a waiver. Again, that goes to your current situation and your need. Some folks are out there on their own. Family comes in and helps out when they can, or a family friend, this and that. Some people through, if there's a medical need, if the person has Medicaid, they are able to get 14 hours a week from a nurse to come and check on medications, if they have blood sugar issues, things like that. So when we're talking about services and planning for services, those are all options that your SSA is going to talk to you about. What's your need and how can we meet that? Because it doesn't always have to be met through a waiver.
I know there's a couple county boards on here that are attending today. With these discussions, if you can put a contact information, like if you're from Warren County, Montgomery County, or whatever county you're here, identify the county, and then maybe a contact for like any parent that's on here that's from those counties, someone they can at least start with or reach out to. If you can just put that in the chat, that would be helpful. I see someone's from Warren County, so I see there was a couple people from Warren County on here. If you can just put your contact or a contact that's someone they can talk to about housing, or that would be great. So the starting process, you're talking about, the 6 to 8 months or so. When you're working through school and you're on an IEP and you're getting close to that transition, when do you recommend like parents start thinking about and planning for? Do they wait until their son or daughter establishes like employment, like after they get out of school, or would you start on something like this, like in high school, start planning and talking and discussing all this?
I think again, it goes back to the person on where they're at. Some folks, we know that they're going to get a job. So I think it depends on the person, but it also kind of goes to budget because you have to think of what's the person's income. Because sadly, that's our first starting point. If they can't afford to be out there, even with roommates, we really can't go that far because again, no one's going to be paying for that, except for the individual. So I think with some folks, we need to start in high school just to kind of prep because that transition is probably going to be harder. Some folks, maybe we don't wait until the end. It just kind of, unfortunately, it just depends on the person. I think the main thing to remember though is I've come across some situations where the family member will call and be like, okay, well, he's 18, 19 now. So well, he needs to be out by next month. Unfortunately, in Butler County, it does not work that way. Again, we don't have places just to put the person or whatever. That's going to take time and it's going to take, a process because again, we want it to be a good match. We want everybody to be happy and we want everybody to be successful.
Does anybody have any other questions? I want to give out an opportunity for those who need more questions answered to ask. We did put a couple, there are a couple contacts out there for some of the counties that are on today. And I just wanted to let you know also, like we cover independent living we covered it last year. You can go to our YouTube videos and look at some of last year's. I believe it was Warren County. We had them speak about their housing. There was also, we had encouragement for parents. It was about from Scott Osterfeld. He used to be with Butler County Board of DD, but then he later, he's working at various places. He's now at Miami University. But he was talking about he's really strong on helping to socialize your child in the community when they look at this independent living. So that may be something, if you want to go into their YouTube and look at last year's, it's under the playlist Independent Living and Life Skills. We will be also looking at, in January, we have a speaker talking specifically about life skills as well. And we have also, like I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we had Allison Boot last week. She gave us a checklist, which we also included in the file of the Google Salt Drive of living independently, things to think about. And she mentioned that maintenance. She said they started out in a house, a home, and she found the maintenance was so difficult and they moved into an apartment situation. But that was, for them, it worked best for them that way.
Mhm.
So I think parents, as a parent, these are things you need to start working on. I think the life skills would be and talking to your SSA, but starting with those life skills, I think would be the first step to seeing, working towards that independent living. Would there be is that, Christy, is that what, you're saying too, is start with that life skills? What can they do?
Yep, I think that's great. The life skills is a great starting point because, again, we want, if the person needs help, that's great. We're going to try and find ways to get that help. But if the person can help in any aspect, plus it makes the person feel better. I think another big piece to remember is when someone moves out of the family home, mom and dad can do a lot of things that we can't do when the person moves out. So, if the person doesn't clean their room or do their laundry, whatever, mom and dad can put consequences in on that if they choose to. When you're outside of that family home, we cannot. So, if they don't do their laundry or they don't take their meds or they don't take a shower, we can have those conversations with them, but we can't give quote unquote consequences to that. And that sometimes is a challenge for parents, just because that's a big difference. Well, what do you mean that they can eat pizza for breakfast if they want to? Well, it's their choice. We can encourage, but we can't force.
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point. The other thing you mentioned was some of the aspects of assisted technology, and looking at that, bringing that into the equation for when you're looking at just an example for medicines. Maybe you have your maintenance medicines, but what about like if they have a temporary illness and they have to use medicine that they have to titrate, that like they take 3 one day to the next one, and there's those changes in medication doses, having the help with that. I think when they're living on, if your parents are not around, you got to think, if you're not here, who's going to step in? And those are serious questions you'd have to take or have with the SSA, and then to make sure the assisted technology or that provider or whoever's in place to step in.
And I think as SSAs, we all welcome you guys know your son and daughter more better than the rest of us. And when they move out of the family home for that first time or change living situations, we would prefer you guys to be there and to help us out, not only for us, but also for your loved one. Because when it's an emergency and we wait till that last minute, it's traumatic and it's a lot of moving pieces. So anything that we can pre-plan and prepare the person for, and you guys are there to kind of help and explain and support, that ideally is the best situation. Now, again, emergencies happen. We all know that. But when we're talking about planning and, what's the best situation, the more involved and the more positivity and openness that we have in these conversations, the better.
And I think, as you mentioned, each county's different. I think there's some counties that actually have homes that they use, like specific homes or housing, not so much as a group housing, but like individual houses within a community. Is Butler County like that? Do they have individual houses like in a community, or does
There
it?
are certain homes, like there may be a street in Hamilton where it just so happens that 2 or 3 groups of people live. But no, we don't have certain groups where that's all that it is. It's just kind of a random coincidence that 3 or 4 homes may be on the same street.
Okay, yeah, I've heard a couple counties have those options with homes, and there's a couple people living in them, and they have like a, I'm not sure if it's a provider or someone that is there, check in on them sometimes around mealtime or whatever.
There are, going back to the ICF, their intermittent care facility, some of those are larger, like say it's 65, 70 beds. Some providers have smaller, what they do call group homes. So I know like in Middletown, there's 3 or 4, I believe they're 8 bed, what they call group homes, but it's technically just a smaller ICF. And another thing to remember is with an ICF, that's not something that your local county board monitors. That is the state DODD system. So if someone should move into an ICF, we technically discharge you from the local DD services, but you're linked to the bigger system. Like you have a case manager and things like that at the ICF. So it's not like you're not receiving services. It's just the local DD county does not follow along with that service.
Is there any other questions for Christy today? Like I recommended, go back and look at some of our previous videos on different supports. I mean, the assistive technology and different things like that. If you're interested or think your child's going to need those supports, talk to the SSA as to what's out there. I always say start with your county board and then build from there. The SSA or your transition coordinator would know a lot of these supportive services, and they know your individual.
And as far as Butler County, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'm always going to loop your SSA back into the conversation. They're your main point of contact, but you're more than welcome to reach out to me about housing. And then I'm always just going to loop your SSA back in to let them know what we've talked about or what we've discussed, things like that.
And if you don't have an SSA or you're not connected with your county board or a county board, there's, different ones have provided their emails in here, or you could probably just reach out to one of them or Christy if you're like, hey, I'm from, another county, this other county, and they're not listed. Who would I reach out to? Any of us could probably get you that phone number to start the eligibility process to reach out to them.
Absolutely.
Because the last thing we want you to do is, be stuck. It's an easy thing to get stuck with decision making. It gets overwhelming. So you want to have someone there helping you with the little pieces at a time. Even another aspect is in each county, there's like a benefit analysis person that can look at and review the financial, like what kind of benefits you're receiving, what kind of money flow, do you have a job, what kind of income is brought in there, and they can look at that whole picture and help also with determining some of these areas that you're looking at.
It's a lot. Like you said, it's overwhelming. There's a lot of moving parts. And it can be frustrating at points. And let's just be honest, it's not an easy process as well. So that's where I'm always open communication is just best. If you have questions, ask. And I'm the first to admit I am not an expert. And if I don't have the answer for you or don't know where we go from here, I'll reach out and try and figure out where we go.
Now, one question I do have too. So if you have a son or daughter, and you find a place that's maybe near mom and dad or maybe near family, but it needs some modifications to it. Does the county board help with that, or does anybody help with that? If you find an apartment or a house, we'll say an apartment that works for our son or daughter, but it needs some modifications, who would be able to assist with that, or even with a house? Who could assist with those kind of options?
I would talk to your SSA because there may be funding out there for that. I think the thing that we look at is, say you're looking, you need a ramp built or you need a bathroom made accessible. We want to know, is this place somewhere where you plan on being for several years? Because say we build a ramp outside, but then 3 months down the road, you're like, I don't like it here. I want to move somewhere else. That funding's probably not going to be there again to build you a new ramp. So those will be discussions that you'll talk about. So there may be, reach out to your SSA and see what's available, but those are the things that they would be looking at. What's the need? Is it medical? Can it be met a different way? And if not, is this somewhere where you're gonna, plus when it's a landlord, sometimes we have to be sure that the landlord's okay with us altering those things as well.
And there's probably things to look at too that are permitted and things like that.
Right.
All right. Are there any other questions for Christy or any in general, any questions that you need answers or concerns? I think we had gotten all the ones up to this point. Yeah. And each county has, you have a county board in every county, you have a JFS in every county. You mentioned reaching out to Medicaid as well, or is that they can do that through the county board, right? Just talk about Medicaid. Yeah.
Correct. Any questions about your Medicaid, reach out to your local Medicaid or Job and Family Services. I will tell you, if the individual's over 18, if they don't have a release on file, they may give you a hard time. So be sure that that paperwork, and typically that form is on their website as well, that they just sign and give you permission to talk to them on their behalf.
Good to know. Any other questions? All right, I'll linger a little bit if anybody, wants to. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll be lingering on a little bit longer if anybody has any questions or wants to ask anything without the recording on. But I want to thank all those who are viewing, who all attended regarding our home sweet home. This is always a question that always looms in your mind. What's going to happen to our child? There's so many aspects when we are no longer around or as we age, we become, we may need assistance, but how do we set up for our child for their success? So there's a lot of stuff we need to think about, and preparing is the best way to get around that, or be ready for that part of life or that stage of life. And it comes pretty fast. But I want to thank everybody for attending. And let me stop this recording and I'll stay on a few minutes. If you have any other questions, you can unmute and ask. But thank you again all for coming. And Christy, thank you again for your thorough presentation. It gave us a lot to think about.
And I can stay on too for a few minutes if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.